He told us we couldn't take a weekend trip. And then I found the vacation fund he was spending money from on another woman. It's late. The house continues in that tight, humming way it does when the fridge is the loudest beast in the room. I'm at the kitchen table with a cold mug of chamomile, and I can see my ghost in the back door, just a shadowy reminder of myself. This is the point Truth is courageous enough to speak, so here we are. I got to know Mark at a friend's barbecue where the burgers were dry and undercooked somehow. He gave me a paper plate heaped high with pickles and said, "There's always hope if there are pickles," which made me laugh. He was a nice guy to hang out with. Good stuff. The kind of man who remembered the name of your dog and stood up to flip your pancake before you even realized it needed to be flipped. Having dated men who felt like cliff edges for years, he was a warm hiking trail. We were sweet in the beginning. We'd grab dollar slices after concerts, nap on blankets in the park on Sundays, split grocery lists like a sport. He loved numbers, loved budgeting. He'd pull out his laptop, slide his glasses up his nose, and make little charts for our future. "We'll be smart," he'd say, tapping a cell that said down payment. "We'll do it right the first time." When we had our first apartment together, it was tiny, was one of those houses where the hallway was so small that you walked sideways with clean laundry. I strung white Christmas lights over the sink, and he joked we'd be the couple who never took them down. We were at the point in life when vacation equaled sleeping in and calling for Chinese food again, promising we'd make it to the coast the next summer. The next summer came and went. "We can't now," he'd say, pulling me into his arms. "I want to get you someplace better when we can do it right." I told myself it was romantic, his holding off. I came from a family where money was perpetually burning a hole in someone's pocket or else going down the drain. His stability was security. And when I requested that weekend in the mountains, the dingy cabin with the linoleum and the fake fireplace, and he shook his head, I let it go. When I mentioned a last-minute visit to my sisters in Arizona, he replied that flights were too costly at the time. It was logical. Prices were higher. Gas was ridiculous. We were being economical. He was handling the bills himself because he liked it, said it put him in the zone. Working as a school counselor was irregular hours, and truthfully, when I came home, I didn't feel like opening up spreadsheets. I appreciated it. He'd hand me a debit card and say, "Use this for groceries." I'll send money over every other Friday, and he did. Nothing ever bounced. Rent was paid. The Wi-Fi never fell because we paid the bill on time. We were adults. We were fine. Little things started to ping me, though. We were in the living room one night, me scrolling through a list of best cheap road trips and him saying, "God, I wish. But the car needs new tires," and he rubbed his eyes as if he were fatigued by our reality. The next morning, I found a hotel matchbook in the cup holder of his car. The kind with a stylized wave logo and Santa Catalina in gold embossed foil on it. Old-fashioned and oddly romantic. "Oh," he said when I held it up in the kitchen. "Work party. California clients." I brought it with us because it was nice. He smiled. He was always so charming when he wanted to be. "Hey, babe, you making those chicken enchiladas tonight?" Another Saturday, residents a trifle sunburned for a fellow who'd professed to have spent the day in conference rooms. "Lunch on a patio," he said, shrugging. They set us under one of those heaters. I was convincing myself to be paranoid. That's half the issue with trust. You convince yourself out of your gut because not trusting is like opening a trapdoor. I'd have a charge in our joint account under airlines, bag fee, and he'd tell me our company card didn't take, so I had to pay a bag fee. Got reimbursed. He never lacked an excuse. And I thought of the man who drove to my office one day during a blizzard because he thought my car tires were bald. We were planning a beach getaway during the summer my dad got sick. We needed something soft to hold on to. "Maybe Outer Banks?" I said, holding up my computer with a chipped blue-painted house and porch swing. He laid his hand on top of mine and pressed hard. "When your dad's better," he said, "we'll take you somewhere nicer. You deserve better." It was like a promise. It was like love. The day I found out about the bank account, it was mindlessly typical. I'd called in sick because something didn't feel right. I mean, my skeleton was humming and I just couldn't grasp a thought. I just figured it was burnout. I did laundry. I watered the plants. I opened the stuck mail on the hall table because clutter of that kind makes me nervous. Insurance letters. A catalog. Something addressed to, Turner from some bank I had never heard of, Cedar Ridge Credit Union, using that patronizing little welcome font. I was holding there, thumb under the seal. Could have returned it. Could have sent him a photo with a smiley face and "what's this?" But my thumb was already in motion and the paper tore, and I opened it with that crummy feeling like stepping into traffic. It was a quarterly report. A light blue sheet of paper with tidy columns. The kind of thing that looks, I don't know, benign. But my eyes jumped to numbers like they were lit up. Deposits that I didn't know about. Transfers from a routing number I didn't recognize. And then the expenditures. Lots of them. Airlines. Hotels with names that seemed to have an eucalyptus aroma. A sunset sail for an outrageous sum of money. I flipped the page and there were dates, and there, my birthday weekend. The Sandglass Resort, $1,897.48. The same weekend he'd said he'd have to fly into Denver because a client rolled out a new system. I sat down on the stairs because my legs weren't cooperating very much. I remember the banister carving a dent into my forearm. I remember the sound of the neighbor's dog barking like it was going on inside my own chest. My first reaction, and I'm embarrassed to say this, was practical. This money could have covered our roof. Our goddamn tires. Plane ticket to go see my dad. My second reaction was a scalding, greasy fluid that made me feel ill. He had another life. I picked up the laptop. I had filled in the name of the bank, and the username was right there in front of me because he is a habitual creature and uses the same address for everything. The password was the old Wi-Fi password, the one I had written on a sticky note beside the router for months. The account swung open like a door we didn't realize we had. He referred to it as CRVAC, which may have had no initials behind it, but I wasn't feeling kind anymore. The figures shifted from high to low like a yo-yo. He'd invested $3,000. He'd take $900 out here and $1,200 there. Memo line entries. Tessa flights. Tessa. It might have been a project or a person or a dog, I told myself, because that is my knee-jerk tendency. Be generosity-full in your imagining. And then I scrolled, and there were Venmo receipts stored. Descriptions. Aperol at the Sunset Bar, and split the rental. What a view, with a winky face I had never seen him use with me. The payments had hearts on them. Little hearts. I tapped the charge for a Harborview SPA, couples package, and my world went sideways. I tapped another for Rose and Finch Bistro, a place I had saved in my phone months before as a someday. He'd been there. He'd been everywhere. Just not with me. When he arrived home, the light was that slanted late afternoon and the house was too tidy. He left his keys in the bowl and tapped on my head and said, "Hey, babe, you all right?" like a TV sitcom. I stood there supporting the paper because words didn't come. Was it? His voice increased in pitch. Mark lies with his voice, not his eyes. Your account, I said, and you did a stricture in my throat. Your vacations. He looked at the paper, then me, and some kind of relief passed over his face. That's what I remember most. Not fear. Relief. Like he'd been holding his breath and now, finally, we could talk about it. Okay, he said, palms up like I'd threatened him with a gun. Okay, let's not, this is really bad. Looks, I said once more, for words were coming back slowly like pinched fingers. Who is Tessa? He sat down. He sat before he spoke. This is complicated. Use simple words. He massaged his face, and I caught sight for the first time of a tan line at the spot where his watch lay. We started going on the road to conferences, you know. She's a supplier. He made a noise that resembled a laugh but lacked life. It just happened, okay? It wasn't supposed to be anything. I stared at his socks because I could not bear to look at his face. They were rolled up just so neatly that way I do laundry. This is what betrayal does. It flows through a house like water. It rubs up against things. It even rubs up against the rolling of socks, because your hands did that, and now your hands are strangers. How long, I said. He started counting. Counting. A year? Possibly a little more. A year is a season again. A year is 4th of July and Christmas and my birthday and his birthday and the day the doctor called my dad. A year is too long to have a person in my house who is existing somewhere else, too. Why the account? I asked. Why the lies? Why say no to me on everything and take her to? I looked at the page and read aloud as if I were reading fiction. Miramar, San Diego. A sunset cruise? He ran his hand over the table as if it needed to be smoothed. You concern yourself with money, he whispered, like a parent. It was easier to split it up. And the vacations. It was work that turned into more work. I did not wish to fight with you. I did not. I do not know. He stretched out to me and I flinched back. He looked surprised at the definition of my body. "I love you," he told me, and it sounded like the kind of thing you practice telling someone who does not speak your language, slow and deliberate and absurd. There is a moment of shock at which everything is very intense. I remember the texture of the granite like a map. I remember thinking, I'm not going to pass out because that's what happens in the movies. And then the lights did go out anyway, like someone turned the room 2 notches down. I stood up. I picked up his keys and put them back down. I opened the dishwasher like I was looking for something I'd lost in it. Glass. Forks. The tiny dip in the plastic where the soap goes. Everything sturdy and dumb. "Get out," I finally said. My voice wasn't my voice. It had a metal spine. He started to speak, to depend on all the words we'd built this life out of, but I raised my hand and the words hit it and fell. "Go to one of your nice hotels," I told him, surprising myself with the venom in the words. "They know you, don't they? They have your favorite bathrobes hanging." He stayed at his brother's. He texted me paragraphs I didn't read. My phone vibrated like it was opinionated. I flipped it face down and sat on the shower floor until the hot water ran out and the room was filled with that wilted, cooling steam. The next few days were strangely quiet inside my body. Numb, then loud, then numb again. I went to work because sometimes the pure thing is being around kids. I watched a second grader cry his eyes out over the fact that his gummy bear had cracked open down the middle, and I thought, okay, I get it. Broken ones are still candy, but they are different. At lunch, I looked at my tuna sandwich and I could taste metal. My friend Erin said, "You look pale," and I let her in on it. I explained it the way you explain a thing to soften its absurdity. My husband has an off-the-books bank account he uses to take trips with a woman named Tessa. I laughed because sometimes crying is drowning and I was tired of staying afloat. She embraced me. She brought me fries. She said, "You need a lawyer." I lay in our bed at night alone, gazing out at the vacant half like a cliff. I traced my fingers over the framed photo from our first year, us wrapped in scarves on a dock, and I remembered the wind that day, how it had that bite that makes you alive. I saw that memory didn't belong to what he did. It belonged to me. It was the first time a rope got dropped into the pit. It was a pivotal one, but it remained intact. I made calls. The woman at the credit union was nice in a way that made me want to thank her and smash my phone. I froze the account because my name wasn't on it and I could. I copied down statements. I placed them in a fire engine red folder like an open wound you can view. I found a therapist who did not blink when I explained the matchbooks, the tan lines, the use of "we" as if it were me and a stranger. Tessa wrote to me. That was one day. The subject line was "I owe you the truth," and the letter was an apology of sorts that tasted like a sales pitch. She said she didn't know that he was married at first, and then she did know, but by then things were complicated. She sent photos that I didn't see. I replied with, "Please don't write me again," and she didn't. Mark had to talk. "We can repair this," he said, as though the house was a house with a leaky pipe. I took him to a coffee shop with a lawyer's card in my back pocket and my arms around a paper cup like a rope. He cried. I cried, but mine was different. Mine was not a yelling kind of crying. Mine was sadness. He said he would close the account, that it was stupid, that he is stupid. I thought all of that and none of that. There is something powerful about waiting to decide. About letting the adrenaline drain away so your bones can listen to themselves. I waited a week without making any high-minded declarations. I slept on the couch and looked up at the ceiling and watched dust float in tiny galaxies in the sun of the afternoon. I thought about all those times I'd said no to myself because we were being clever. I thought about that little jar I'd had on the dresser filled with vacation coins, a joke initially, but then something I just did. A couple of quarters whenever I happened to have them. For donuts on our road trip, I'd said. The jar had $18 in it. I awoke one day and the air was thinner. I made coffee and filled the travel mug. I placed the driving playlist I had prepared. I grasped the jar, which was heavier than anticipated. I shoved the red folder into the bag. I turned out the lights and remained in the doorway and heard the house breathe in. I traveled to the coast. It wasn't a plan, but a direction. The sky was the flat kind you only see on gray days, and the highway was empty. I rolled down my window and let my hair have its day. I pulled over at a donut shop and scattered coins on the counter, and the kid working the counter looked delighted money could be like a tail. I ate a sprinkled donut in the parking lot like I was starving, and I laughed when the sprinkles covered everything because something about sprinkles in a car you're driving towards your own life is holy. On the beach, the wind was unfriendly. It rapped on me as if it knew I had to be awakened. I took off my shoes and forced my toes into the cold, and it stung in a manner that made me aware. A gull screamed because gulls scream. I picked up a shell and put it back down because, honestly, I did not want to take anything. I simply wanted to be there. I stood there thinking about how I'd trimmed my wants to stay in the other person's story. How I'd been good and patient and economical, and how those qualities turned into a room I couldn't open a window in. There is a sentence people said to me after the weeks passed, one about how this would strengthen me, and I hated it. I don't want the badge. I just want to stop apologizing to myself for yearning for happiness. So this is what I learned. On that beach with my hair disheveled and my skin salted, I don't need someone to draw up charts to demonstrate I'm worthy of a little softness. I don't need to work for a sunrise. I don't need to be the rational one as someone else, someone who promised me a we builds a second life on capital provided by my trust. I drove home with sand in the vehicle and the radio on too loudly. I called my lawyer and my sister and a therapist, yeah. I also indulged in the weekend special down in the mountains with the imitation fireplace and the scratchy bedding that smells like someone else's soap. I ate gas station gummy worms and did not share them. I told Mark I no longer wanted to be married to him. It wasn't cinematic. It was a sentence with a stop at the end. He cried. I cried afterwards in the shower where water obscurates things. They ask me if I hate him, and I don't, exactly. Hate is hot and blinding. What I experience is an emptiness, an emptying, an opening. And in that space, I can dream. As in, I will wake up on a Saturday and grab my keys and drive to the farmer's market and buy flowers that don't go anywhere in the room.